Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Deborah Rue, CEO of Rue Global Impact, and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deborah Rue, and I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact. And this is Human Potential at Work. And I'm really excited about my guest today. Colleen Miller and I have been friends for years, and I love her work. I think her work is so important. And I really wanted to get you on the show. So Colleen Miller is the executive director of the Disability Law Center in Virginia. We both live and work in Richmond, Virginia. I guess I'm actually Rockville, Virginia, but right on the suburbs. So Colleen, welcome to the program. I have been a fan of your work for so many years. Would you tell the audience about who is Colleen Miller, but also talk about your work with the Disability Law Resource?
But first of all, Deborah, thank you so much for having me on this. I've really been admiring the work you've done on this podcast. It's some really fascinating conversations you've had, and I'm really grateful to be a part of it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, long time coming, Colleen.
Yeah. So my name's Colleen Miller. I am the executive director of the Disability Law Center. I've been here at the Disability Law Center since 2003, except that we've had different names for this organization along the way. When I first came here in 2003, the organization was part of state government. It was called the Virginia Office for Protection and Advocacy. And we worked pretty steadily for the next 10 years to be able to leave state government and become a private nonprofit, fully independent of. The Disability Law Center of Virginia is what's called a protection and advocacy system. We're a creature of federal law, and in one form or another, the federal law has been around since about the mid-1970s, where we were first created in response to the expose of conditions at Willowbrook and other institutions for people with what at that time we called mental retardation. The conditions were disgusting. They were really breathtaking, what we could do to our fellow human beings. And Congress created a series of programs nationwide to be able to address those conditions and to ensure that people with disabilities are fully integrated into the society as much as possible.
Yeah, I like the way you describe that, because it is really sickening what humans can do to each other. It's very sickening. I know when my daughter was born with Down syndrome, they said, well, we don't really institutionalize. You can. And I thought, oh, you better step away from my baby. So it's the thought of putting this precious little soul in an institution is just chilling.
There were many parents at that time, Deborah, and before that, who were not given the choice, who were told this is the only thing you can do with your child. And many of those parents came to feel like this was the best place, this was the safest. Certainly, if their children are out of sight, they're not going to be mocked, they're not going to be made fun of by strangers or anything. And many parents were led to believe that these were safe conditions. They weren't, but that was the story that many parents were being told at that time.
And there was we weren't doing anything. We weren't including them in any part of society. So, yeah, we're evolving. We're reviving. What we've learned during this COVID-19, and I am curious. I'm curious about, have the cases picked up? I would assume they have during COVID-19, but yeah.
Yeah, everything seemed to grind to a halt in March and April of 2020. A lot of our work also slowed down dramatically, and I think honestly, that people just were completely sidetracked by what was going on with the pandemic. Although students were being denied educational opportunities and people were losing their jobs and a lot of really bad stuff, evictions were happening, a lot of really bad stuff was going on, it didn't occur to people to call us and ask for help. For about 2 months, for about maybe 2.5 months. But then the work picked up really dramatically at that point. Yeah. The Disability Law Center of Virginia is in a slightly different position than some of our sister agencies in other states because we have, under state law, we receive reports from all of the community providers about incidents that involve medical emergencies or abuse and neglect. And we really saw just a terrifying spike in the number of allegations, the number of reports concerning people with disabilities who were being impacted by the COVID virus.
Yeah.
People were being denied access to services, access to medical care, because, of course, all of the hospital systems were completely overwhelmed. We saw some situations where it appeared that people with disabilities were being used for experiments with medication, that the medication that was being talked about on the internet as the latest, greatest solution. In some situations, the medications were being used on people with disabilities, and we did not think that those individuals would have given consent for those kinds of experiments.
Oh my gosh, it's horrifying to think that. And a lot of my audience is in the States, but also I am so blessed to have a global audience. I had mentioned to you before you came on that I've actually had the Disability Rights of California on a couple of times talking about topics. And you would mention some of the other states. Do you mind just explaining a little bit about, do we have someone like you and your amazing team in every single state, or am I just blessed to live in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Okay.
There's a protection and advocacy system in every state in the country and in most of the territories and possessions of the United States.
Okay.
There's 56 of us altogether. There's also one that is in the Four Corners region of New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Arizona that serves the Native communities there, the Native American communities there. So yes, there's one of us anywhere in the United States. We're all pretty different, though. We are all allowed to be organized in a way that makes the most sense for our own individual community. You know, as I said, Virginia, under state law, gets a lot of these reports from community providers. That's just not true of most of the other protection and advocacy systems. They learn about abuse and neglect and incidents more from word of mouth, from connections that they have and friendships that they have, that sort of thing.
Yeah, which is interesting. My daughter was in a supported apartment during COVID-19 for a period of time. She lived for about 18 months and she wanted to do it. I just want her to be happy. So she wanted to do it, but it was okay. And then it wasn't okay because her roommate, it was just so hard for everybody, mental health wise, staffing at first. We started getting some really talented staff members. All over the world, we have a problem of not paying our caregivers enough money. That's a huge issue. And at first, we started getting it was really amazing who they were getting to come and work. And then, of course, it shifted and it got real bad. And it actually became, my daughter wanted to move back home. She got spooked. She got very spooked and it's unfortunate. No, there was no malice. Everybody tried to do their best, but it was just a whole bunch of different problems in the background. And so my daughter is home with me now.
As in society, we tend to isolate people with disabilities on a good day. On a good day. That isolation was really just exploded during COVID. Where you couldn't actually go to a grocery store, you couldn't go to the movies, you couldn't go to the gym, places where we naturally would have these kinds of interactions. The isolation that people with disabilities feel on a regular basis just was magnified during COVID. And I could imagine many people felt more comfortable being with their families, closer to their families, closer to environments that are comfortable and familiar to them. So I think your daughter was probably not alone in that.
Oh, I agree. And the people that were supporting her were trying so hard. I had no complaints. Nobody did anything wrong. It's an intense situation we all dealt with. I also heard, Colleen, and I don't want to make the show real depressing, but I just want to talk about this and talk about ways that y'all help. But you do help so much. It's such an important role that you play for our community. But I also saw it was really chilling in that if there was domestic abuse, for example, especially at the beginning of COVID, when nobody was going out and maybe I didn't have to be careful anymore and I didn't have to only hit you where people can't see. So those went way up. And I assume because those things went up, suicides are going up, mental health problems, it's compounds which are trying to do to protect people that are the most vulnerable in our societies.
I don't think there's really any way to talk about the impact of COVID on people with disabilities without being depressing.
I know. I wish you're right, though, Colleen. You're right.
The one thing that has been a positive development for people with disabilities during this and relates to the human potential at work aspect has been that we have really expanded our notion of the way in which we work with each other, the ways in which we're employed with each other. Much more comfortable now doing this kind of technology that you and I are doing, right? Much more accepting of people working from home or working in remote locations. And all of that runs to the benefit of people with disabilities in the long run. There's so many things that we immediately started doing in March and April of 2020 that we just felt was impossible in December of 2019. So that part of it has worked to the benefit of employees with disabilities.
Yeah. And Colleen, how does the community support your organization? Because I know, so you're a quasi agency. Would that be the right word?
What in the United States we call a nonprofit organization. In other countries, I think would call it an NGO, a non-governmental organization. So we're completely independent of any kind of operation, except that all of our authority comes from federal law or state law. But other than that, there's no oversight that is exercised over our operations. All of our funding, the majority of our funding comes from grants, and most of those grants are federal grants. We do have a little bit of funding that comes from donors, and if anybody wants to get onto our website and make a donation, we are very happy.
I agree. And it's so important to support her work too. So really do agree with that.
But I'll say the greatest value that we get of support from our community has been in the nature of volunteers. And we have volunteers all over the Commonwealth of Virginia who help us out with I mentioned to you that we get these incident reports from community providers and hospitals and the like, and we get thousands of them every week.
Wow.
Many more than we can actually really read and process. So we have a core of trained volunteers that access these reports online, review them for us, and prioritize the ones that we really need to look at. And our volunteers really enable us to do that work by reading these sometimes really sad reports and letting us know which ones we need to follow up on.
Wow, that's powerful. Do you find some of your volunteers people with disabilities?
Oh yeah.
I would assume so, because
and family members of people with disabilities too.
Colleen, do you mind just talking about some of the cases, just as an example?
Sure. It's a little hard to narrow that down to just a few. We operate 9 different programs here, 9 different federal grants. Some of them are directed towards helping people to obtain them, and I know that's a particular concern of this podcast. We will assist people to navigate the services and funding that's available through the state and through the federal government to get job training, to get assistive technology, to get the supports that they need to be able to go back to work. Many people who receive Social Security benefits are afraid of going back to work for fear that they will lose those benefits, or even bigger fear that they'll lose Medicaid, that they'll lose their health care coverage. And we can help people figure out how to maximize the employment opportunities without jeopardizing benefits. And there are a lot of ways in which we can help with that. So helping people to obtain employment and maintain employment is one of the ways in which we do that. Probably the biggest amount of work that we do concerns, unfortunately, investigations of abuse and neglect. Those can take place at state hospitals, at private psychiatric hospitals, group homes. We've seen a situation where a woman with an intellectual disability and severe hearing loss was deprived of communications assistance in her home. The provider would not give her a sign language interpreter. So that's one of the ways in which we worked with her. We worked with the provider. We actually, at one point, worked with the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Virginia, to ensure that she had the communications assistance that she needed.
Yeah. It's a shame that you have to do that, but thank goodness somebody is. And I remind everybody that we are the United States. And so we are really into states' rights. And so the way the Commonwealth of Virginia does things is different from North Carolina or West or anybody else. So but at the same time, all of these 56 organizations, y'all also support each other and share information and data. And did y'all get involved at all during COVID-19 with people with disabilities, especially people like my daughter with intellectual disabilities that were being denied services? I was so glad I didn't live in Alabama, for example, and because if she had Down syndrome in Alabama, she could have been denied medical equipment to save her life. So.
Yeah, we saw really a wide variety of things happening during COVID that amounted to a denial of services. One of the more challenging ones that we took on concerned the requirements to wear masks in public accommodations. And so many people with disabilities who were really challenged by wearing a mask, either because of breathing problems or essentially claustrophobic issues with being enclosed like that. And so the balance there was that a business could require you to wear a mask if you're going to come in. And in some states, the businesses had to require a mask. So if an individual with a disability can't wear a mask, what the business had to do was offer an accommodation, which could mean curbside service, bringing the goods out to them, maybe assisting with web ordering or online ordering services. Some businesses had a time when the business was open early for an hour or two, just for those who could not wear masks. So there were a number of ways in which this could be accommodated. But the real challenge was explaining to people with disabilities that no, actually, they can require the mask and you can't insist on going in without the mask. So that was a dicey one for us to navigate.
I think that Americans have really learned a lot during this about what our laws are, what our Constitution does and does, not just this with some former presidents too. I think we're a lot more informed than we used to be. I think sometimes Americans think we always have the right to do whatever we want. But, there's actually, we're learning a lot about that. So I just think that the role that you play is so important because it's great to have laws. But if people don't follow laws and if people there's no consequences for not following laws, really vulnerable people get taken advantage of. And go ahead.
I was going to say we really have a range of tools that we can use in enforcing those laws. We start out by training medical providers, housing providers. Sometimes they're just acting out of a lack of knowledge. Right. And often, the vast majority of cases that come to us, we're able to resolve just by explaining what the law, and the vast majority of cases go away at that level. We are also capable of putting on a little bit of pressure. We have the ability to threaten, to sue, and to follow through and sue where we need to, and we have had to do that in some cases. We have the ability to go to the legislature and talk about reforms that are necessary or reforms that haven't worked. We have the ability to talk to the media about reforms that are necessary or reforms that haven't worked. So we've really got a range of tools available to us to try to enforce these laws or improve the law.
I know, it's amazing the resources that y'all do have. And you told me one time, how many lawyers work for your?
We've just got 12 lawyers on staff.
Just 12, only 12. And you're a lawyer, right? Aren't you a lawyer too?
So, yes, I'm a lawyer too. I usually don't admit that in public. But so, Deborah, there's 1 million people with disabilities in Virginia, and we have to cover the entire state. 12 may seem like a lot of lawyers. We have 38 people on staff, and really a much more multidisciplinary approach to solving problems than just straight lawyers. But 38 people and 1 million people with disabilities. And people with disabilities, they aren't necessarily confined to just one issue. They often have multiple things that they are working on.
And of course, your audience is growing every day.
Right.
Because we are an aging society. All over the world, we're aging dramatically here. The baby boomers are now 56 years and older. And AARP says that over the age of 65, 46% of Americans have disabilities. How do y'all handle those issues?
I would say we do not, I don't think we've figured out the solution for that yet. The biggest challenge for serving elders with disabilities is that we don't admit to having disability. My eyesight gets a little bit worse every single year. When I go back to the doctor, it's a little bit worse. I do not consider myself a person with vision loss. I've been tested and I'm right at the place where I could probably start using hearing aids. I don't consider myself a person with hearing loss. Right. And I think that this is the biggest challenge. You won't ask for help for a disability if you don't admit you've got a disability.
Because if you admit you have a disability, you're broken. That's what society tells us. That's why you were one of the first people that I called when we started creating Billion Strong. And you right out of the gate said, I want to be a global advisor. How can I help? Because I actually think, Colleen, we need to, when things are safer, we need to get you into other countries talking about what you're doing, because what you do, what your organization does, and all these organizations all over our country, it is essential to people with disabilities, because we do, and like you said, not all of it turns into lawsuits. Some of it is just, let me explain what our laws are. Let me explain what you have to do and how creative you can be. But right now, that doesn't happen. Do you see? That is not happening. So I have two big questions for you. I have that question, because I know that you can talk about what you're doing and what you learn and how our laws can change as you're learning stuff. But also, it's very powerful to the employers as well. So do employers pay you to come in? I only say it like that because you have to take care of 1 million people with disabilities. So I don't want corporate employers asking you to do this work for free. I would like them to pay you. Just my opinion as a citizen, because they'll benefit from your knowledge. And so,
yes, we were actually developing a curriculum like that for employers around the time that COVID hit. And that really set us back a little bit. We are available to provide training to employers. At this point, we are not charging for it. We have sometimes when a lawsuit is, the defendant will be required to get training. And in those cases, if we provide it, we do charge for it. But honestly, we're a steal. We're a bargain.
I know. And actually, we want you to take those courses and put them out on Billion Strong so everybody can have access to them. Yeah, because sometimes we don't like to talk about this because it's painful. But we have to talk about it, and we have to celebrate your work and all of your colleagues and all of those amazing volunteers, and we have to fund your work as well. And so that's why I thought it was past time for you to come on. Now, do y'all take on any of issues with accessibility? And the reason why I ask that is because, once again, if we can't have access to technology or communications, we can't get educated or work. So I was just wondering if that falls under what y'all do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The way we try to do things here is, as we get an individual case, we try to find individual cases that have a larger impact, that have a systemic impact, because that's the way we spread our resources the best. So if we've been seeing a pattern of, saying, doctors who are refusing to provide sign language interpreters, which I'm sorry to say, we see a pattern of that. We try to find a healthcare provider that's doing that, where if we fix it here, it's going to ripple out to other offices. And we approach that with employers. If you're employed by a small employer, we might be more likely to take a case with a large employer and then get a big policy, get a big training in place, something like that, and then try to translate those changes to other employers at that point.
And I just want, it is so critical that you are doing that, because you want to have impact. And so I just love that you're strategically thinking like that, and you know that if you have strategic impact here, everybody else will benefit. So compliments to that. Now tell the audience how they can learn more about what you're doing.
We have amazing resources on our website, and that is www.dlcv.org. And for those of you who are outside of Virginia, most of our resources are Virginia specific, but I will tell you, I think that we have the best resources in the country on Social Security. and how to apply for them, how to work your way through that process, which is a very confusing and sometimes very discouraging process. So if you're not in Virginia, but that's the issue you're struggling, check out our website. We've got videos, we've got podcasts, we've got fact sheets, we've got all sorts of great information available to people.
For free.
Yes, for free, absolutely. If you do live in Virginia, we actually have people on call 3 days a week. If you have a specific issue that you need some help with, you can call our number at 1-800-552-3962, and you'll be connected to what we call a subject matter expert. So it'll just be short-term assistance. We'll spend 20 minutes or an hour or so with you to help you figure out how to organize your paperwork, what arguments to put forward, that sort of a thing. But that's another valuable free service that we offer to people in Virginia.
And it is such a confusing system. It's so confusing.
For Social Security, we do periodically, 3 or 4 times a year, we'll offer a clinic where you can sign up and work with our advocates, and they will help you figure out what your strongest documentation is, what arguments to lead with, what kinds of gaps you have in your proof, and how you might be able to fill those. And so if you are considering applying for Social Security, I encourage your listeners to look for those opportunities too.
And do y'all charge the individuals that come?
No, it used to be that if we represented them in an actual hearing to receive the benefits, that we'd take our attorney's fees. We'd take a little bit less than our attorney's fees. But those cases are very time intensive, and there are private practitioners who will take them.
Okay.
So we have decided to focus our efforts at an earlier stage in the process and help people get their acts together, get their arguments organized first.
Sort of teach everybody to fish, so they can take care of themselves. And you're on social media?
Yes, we're on Twitter and Facebook, and I think Instagram. I think we've got a YouTube channel.
LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. All right. There we go. Didn't even know that. There we go.
That's right. So lots of ways, but Colleen's available as a speaker to help, no matter where you are. She's really committed to this. And
Absolutely.
we are so blessed that she's in Virginia. So blessed.
Yeah.
And we're so glad that you're paying attention and helping, because I don't know how bad it would be if y'all weren't there. I really encourage employers, especially Virginia, anybody in Virginia, to fund them, sponsor them.
Thank you.
If they're giving their training away for free, give them money so they can do their work.
Thank you.
We need to support the people that are making a difference, and Colleen Miller and her team definitely are doing that. So, Colleen, thank you for being on the show. I'm hoping you'll come back on again.
Absolutely.
We'll have all positives. We will explore everything.
That'll be wonderful. That'll be wonderful. But that'll take us a couple weeks. So
that's right. Just a few.
Right.
So anyway, thank you to the audience. Thank you to Colleen Miller and her amazing team. And we got this. We're going to all be okay. It's intense, but everybody be safe.
That's right. Thank you so much for having us.
Colleen.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Rue Global Impact, visit rueglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.